This is Tuesdays with Ted. That's me. And I'm sharing with you everything that I know in hopes that you can elevate your life. Hello, everyone. It's Ted, and it's Tuesday, 3 p.m., and we are live right now for Tuesdays with Ted, which is a show I do here every week, and I pick a topic and we talk about it, and then it's usually chock full of tools to help us all live a better life. Well, today, I don't know if you heard the news, and it's a discussion, so if you ever feel like you want to add something or ask a question, or I'm here for you. So what happened today, actually, in the news, was we found out that more people are dying of drug overdoses, right? And now I think it's like it went from 16 people per 100,000 to 19 people per 100,000, which may not feel like a lot of people dying, but it's this opioid epidemic that people are talking about and that you may have heard about is actually pretty powerful, right? So I just felt like it's time to talk about addiction, especially because I have some experience with addiction. For those of you that don't know, back in 1993 or something like that. Yeah, it was 1993, September 12th, 1993. I finally said, okay, that's it, I'm done with the drugs and the alcohol and everything else that I was doing at the time. And I grew up so this is part, a little bit of personal history. I grew up in an Irish Catholic family. My mom was kind of, alcoholic and a drinker. My dad was a drinker and a gambler. So we had addiction in our household. So it makes sense that it doesn't fall far from the tree, that what was modeled for me essentially became true for me when I was young. Thankfully, like I said, at 22, because I'm now 47 years old, and my watch tells me how old I am, so I don't have to actually remember. No, 46. Anyway, so the point is that I was lucky enough to catch my addiction early. But what's interesting for people is, hey Ryan, hey Fletch, what's interesting for people is that sometimes in the world of addiction, we just transfer from one addiction to another. Now, hopefully that addiction is, you go from a unhealthy addiction to a healthy addiction. That would be awesome, right? If you could, hey Ashley, how's motherhood? Hey Julie. So the idea really is to somehow, some way, it's hard for me to say get over the addiction, because it's just ultimately handling. How do you handle the addiction? And one of the things I think that's so important, obviously, is awareness. So we have to become aware. So for me, back in the day, I was smoking dope 7 times a day. That might have been a problem. I was arrested a couple times for drinking and driving. That's usually a sign, right? Among a lot of other things and things that I don't remember, and your typical stuff that you might do, except I took it to the next level. There was no end for me. And so I came to this screeching halt, and I had to basically clean myself up. And now, looking back 25 years, I can't believe it's 25 years ago, I did a pretty good job. And what I learned when that first happened to me is I sort of got into therapy at the same time I started doing 12 steps. And the reason I bring that into it is because I did a lot of self-exploration. And in yoga, Jeff, yeah. I'm glad I cleaned up too, Jeff. But in yoga, you're also doing self-exploration too, right? You're doing these poses, and you're sort of breathing, and you're examining what's actually happening, which is one of the main points in addiction, I think, that sort of gets lost. And that is what we, as addicts, what we don't have is this ability to just be who we are. So this manifests in a million different ways. So it manifests as drug addiction, as alcohol addiction. It manifests as shopping addiction, smoking, too much coffee, anything that you feel like is gonna quote unquote fix you, that can lead to an addiction, right? I exercise a lot, as most of you know, and that can also be looked at as an addiction, right? If I don't get, now I've had to play with this whole very sort of subtle, not so subtle addiction personality that I have, and I've had to say, well, if I'm training on a regular basis and it gets to be part of my regular schedule, and then all of a sudden something happens and I get an injury, or we're out of rhythm for some reason, family stuff or whatever it is, and I start to get pissed off, and I'm like, well, F you, I'm not gonna go, I get angry because I don't get my fix. Well, then it's not beneficial. I mean, it might be helping me because I'm getting stronger, but it's not beneficial to my overall life. And every day is leg day. Hey, what's going on? Yesterday was leg day at Tony's, and I'm already feeling it actually from plyometrics. I'm definitely not addicted to plyometrics, that's for sure. But anyway, so what I firmly believe, and I learned this from John Bradshaw's book on the family, is that a pathological relationship to anything is unhealthy. So again, it could be exercise, right? If you're an exercise junkie and you don't get your exercise, and all of a sudden you're flipping out and you're throwing things across the kitchen, well, what good is that doing you, right? It's like, ultimately, we want to do things that enhance our lives, that make us better, that make us a little bit more pliable, a little bit more amenable with what happens in life. So this morning I was planning on going for a run, and it turned out that I did plyometrics last night. So I was, and then I had a friend ask if we wanted to swim. Gabriella was like, hey, let's swim tomorrow. So I thought, well, it's fine. I'm not going to get my run, but I had to go through in my head, well, oh, Esmeralda now? Nice. I'm glad you're doing that. Did you finally get to my week? Anyway, so it's okay for me now to go, okay, well, I'm not going to do what I was planning on doing to get my exercise fix. I'm going to do something different, and that's okay. So the plans change, and you have to deal with life's unexpected, like banging in the background. But the idea when this comes down to addiction is it manifests in so many different ways. And the first thing that I want you guys to understand is that you have to become aware of some. If you happen to be the kind of person who is fixated on a specific thing, figure out what that is, right? And if you can, start to understand how you operate. And really this, I know it says addiction because this whole opioid thing is mind-boggling to me, how people are more and more addicted, and people still smoke and people still drink too much, and to me, it's like batshit crazy that people are still doing this, but it makes complete sense because it's with food too, you guys. It's totally, people who are overfeeding themselves, that's an addiction. And what we have to do as human beings, and what we have to do as people who aren't necessarily doing these unhealthy things to hurt ourselves, is we have to start helping other people, because otherwise, the obesity epidemic, the addiction epidemic, it's just going to be on and on and on, how detrimental it's going to be to our own society. So we have to represent the people who are actually healthy and strong, and you have to walk around as a big billboard to say, hey, look at me, I'm healthy and you can be too, because there's a lot of people when you look around who aren't very healthy. And what I want to do is make sure that we kind of break down the addiction, becoming aware of it, and then a few different ways to actually help deal with it, all right? So first thing is, and again, feel free to ask questions all the time. I'm looking both at Facebook and Instagram here. And my apologies about my neighbor who's drilling or doing something at the moment. But anyway, so first thing is become aware of it. So how do you become aware of it? Well, you just take a really good deep look at your life. So is what you're doing helping you or hurting you? And not just you in general, but your family and your community, for instance. If you're drinking and driving, are you, first of all, you shouldn't be drinking and driving. But there are little signs that will happen, right? Maybe your relationship is deteriorating and you're fixing yourself. This is why I have zero tolerance for infidelity, because if someone who cheats on someone else is a coward, as far as I'm concerned, because ultimately what that means is you're not willing to face the other person in the relationship, right? You're like, oh, I'm not getting what I want in the relationship, so I'm going to search outside the relationship to see if I can fill this need that I don't have. And that's just a coward. That's a coward who's escaping. I don't want to deal with this, so I'm going to go escape and fix myself in some way that I think is going to help me, right? So that's why, please, that's just crazy. Be a real person, stand up to your fears, and approach the person that it is that you're having difficulty with, instead of fixing in some way. Now, I mention that because that's exactly what we all need to do with ourselves on a regular basis. We need to really take a good look in the mirror. And this not only works in the addiction, but it also works in the yoga practice too, when you really take a good, honest look at yourself. So for me, for instance, I'll give you a story. I went from doing drugs and alcohol and all that sort of stuff, stopped, right? Cold turkey, boom, 25 years ago. And I was crazy. I was like psychotic. I was smoking cigarettes. I was drinking coffee 3-4 times a day. So I was still addicted. I basically transferred one addiction to the other addiction. But it got healthier, right? It got healthier. Oh, Dave, thanks for helping me break my addiction with what you did at P90X2 and 3. Right on, Dave. So that's right. So exercise can become a healthy thing. That was one of my salvations. One of my salvations was using exercise to help me get through the quote-unquote insanity in the mind, because the mind is really, really powerful. And one of the ways that we let go of that is through faith, right? So anyway, first thing is to become aware of what might be happening in your life. So are you, I don't know, ruining your position at work? Are you always thinking about the next fix? And again, it could be drugs, it could be the cigarette, it could be the food, it could be the sugar, it could be shopping, it could be travel, it could be anything. It could be the next run, it could be the next swim, right? It could be anything that if you don't get it, you get pissed off because you didn't get it, right? And that's always a good litmus test. Like, what happens if you're a runner and you don't get to run for a week? Are you going to be okay? For me, I remember the injury was my big deal when I couldn't run for 9.5 months about 6 years ago. And I was freaking out. I was like, oh my gosh, this is not okay. And I kept breathing, I kept doing my yoga, all that sort of stuff. But eventually I was on my bike and I was able to kind of get the same sort of positive vibes from being on my bike. And I was able to understand that I didn't want to lash out because I wasn't getting my run in to my girlfriend, wife at the time. But it was that self-awareness and that continual self-examination. Esmeralda now, totally agree. She, before was a coward at the time, did not want to deal with the problem, but able to look back and be honest with myself. Yeah, awesome. I love that. So anyway, for me, when I didn't have my runs on a regular basis, and all of a sudden I had to really be honest with myself and say, okay, wait a second, I need to make sure that I'm not going to lash out because I'm not getting what I normally want. Because the quote-unquote addict isn't getting his fix, how can I still be okay with that? And that's really what, and again, it could be coffee, it could be cigarettes, it could be yoga even, right? If you're a regular yoga practitioner and you don't get your yoga practice in, are you upset? And that's the thing, is just become aware of that. So first thing is awareness. So you have this kind of dual mentality. Yes, you're going to do your life, whatever that is, your work, your job, your family, your exercise, all these things that you're doing, the events that you're doing, whatever it is. And at the same time, what is the motivation behind it? Is it that you feel this kind of empty hole? I think that's the big thing for an addict. What we do is we try to fill this hole. And that's what I want to make sure that we learn from today. Now, this, by the way, takes a lifetime for some people, and some people never understand it. But this hole that we're always trying to fix, whether it be food, drugs, alcohol, whatever it is, we have to understand on a deep level that we don't need those things. And there was some point in my life somewhere, and I forget when it was, but I just remember thinking, and at this point I was clean, but I remember thinking to myself, I don't want to be the kind of person who needs something outside of myself. I want to be completely, I mean, obviously you need food, you need shelter, and you need water. We need human connection, but that can also be an addiction. Right? And in John Bradshaw's book on the family, he talks about all kinds of different abuses: sexual abuse, emotional abuse, physical abuse, alcohol abuse, drug abuse, and on and on and on. Right now, I'm sure food addictions would be in there, and sugar abuse would be in there. Obviously, heroin and this opioid stuff, which is just mind-blowing. I mean, it's totally crazy. But it happens to a lot of people on a regular basis, which is why we're talking about it today. So I wanted to make sure that whatever, if you find yourself, you become aware enough to understand that there is some little bit of a hole inside that you feel like you're filling in some way that might not be the healthiest way, because you can do it in a healthy way. But if you feel like it's unhealthy, just become aware and see if there's some way that you can bring a little bit more faith into your life. Now, I know this is not, I don't want to go into a whole big religious talk, but somehow find some way. If you are religious, then pray to God. And if not, maybe it's Buddha, or maybe it's the sun or the wind or the ocean or whatever it is, but something that you feel like is this kind of, I guess for me it's the universe, right? So for me it's this overall grand power that's like way bigger than I can possibly even think about, that I know has an intelligence of sorts, right? And yeah, all about balancing stuff out, exactly. So, but for me, when stuff doesn't go my way, that's a big deal. When stuff doesn't go my way, all of a sudden I want to fix on something, right? And that, as an addict, that's a big deal for a lot of addicts. That if it doesn't go their way, right, they're control freaks. So if it doesn't go their way, they immediately want to fix on it. Or get that hole, fill that hole so they feel better. And that is always a temporary fix. Like a drink, for instance, for an alcoholic. Person takes a drink, they feel better immediately. It's like instant gratification, right? There's that dopamine rush. They feel anesthetized. They drink away their sorrows, as it were, right? Well, what I want to make sure that we start doing as a culture is being okay with not being okay. So can you be okay when you're sad? Or can you be okay when you're angry and pissed off? Right? The four sort of main, it's angry, mad, sad, glad, and afraid. Right? So I remember when I quit smoking. I'll never forget. So it was 1997 to 98. So it was that New Year's Eve. So actually we're coming up on almost 20 years of me not smoking. That's crazy. But I remember it was New Year's Eve. I took my last cigarette, 11:58 p.m. I put it out on December 31st, 1997. So I was in New York City. I was actually hanging with my buddy Patrick, my cousin, and we put it out 11:58. A couple days later, I went to the Asia Society to watch these Buddhist monks do a desecration of a sand mandala. If you've ever seen this, it's like an unbelievable experience. These two monks spent, I think, 6 weeks, 8 hours a day with very tiny sand, super bright orange sand, super bright blue, yellow, green, all kinds of stuff, making this amazingly huge, what's called the sand mandala or mandala, and it's artwork, like ancient artwork from Buddhism. And what they do is they make it out of sand, And then after they make it, they say a little prayer and they take a little dustpan and they wipe it all up. And I was blown away by this idea. First of all, it's beautiful. It's a beautiful experience to see, to witness. So I went there and I thought, I'm a few days off smoking. I'm freaking out because, my whole body's like jittery. And I thought, I'm going to this kind of Buddhism, Asia Society thing. No one's going to be smoking. Sure enough, I get in line. There's like 60 people in line. And there's like 4, 5, 6 people smoking. I'm like, what? Are you guys kidding me? I thought this was like a healthy central, right? Anyway, I came up against this pull toward the cigarette, right? And so I remember just kind of holding my arms and just go, whatever you do, don't smoke. Whatever you do, don't smoke. Then I got to a point, and then I started to look at it a little deeper. Why was it that I wanted to smoke? What was it? And it was because I felt uncomfortable, and I wanted a fix. And the fix was going to fix me, but it was only temporary. It was, a 2-minute cigarette? And then that might last a little bit longer, but then that would come up again, this uncomfortableness, this discomfort, right? So eventually what happened was I sat on my hands and said, I have to deal with the discomfort. And that's one of the things that we have to teach people, is how to deal with being uncomfortable. So many people will reach for the ice cream, for the sugar, for the drink, for the drug, for all that sort of stuff, and they miss out on this beautiful experience of being uncomfortable, of being sad, of being angry. Now, I'm not saying go overboard. I'm not saying lash out at some individual. But I'm saying if you're angry, be angry. It's okay to be angry. If you're pissed off because somebody did something, then do it. If you're pissed off at yourself, then be angry at yourself, but then let it go, right? And have faith and trust that it's gonna be okay. So that's the thing, is with a lot of this addiction that's happening, I think we've lost this ability to connect with this something, a power greater than ourselves, inside or outside, that will help us. And I think we've put our faith into worldly things, and just, if that's your thing, just make it bigger. Make it bigger than what you can conceive, because if you can start to conceive of it, you've already kind of lost the idea, right? It needs to be something big, and then something that can kind of help float you. Think of it as like a magic carpet, right? There's Rumi actually had a poem, and he said, we hold on for our whole lives. We're holding on super tight. We finally let go, and we fall up. And it's such a great little poem, because we're thinking, oh my gosh, we're falling. And then finally we let go, and we start to fly. But we have to trust, and we have to have faith. And there's a load of different books on all of this stuff. But what I just saw this report from the CDC today that talked to how opioid and drug overdoses are now killing more people than car crashes. Right? Everybody used to say, oh my gosh, with Mothers Against Drunk Driving and all this kind of stuff. It was like, there's thousands and thousands of car crashes. Drug overdoses now, I think it's accidental deaths. It's the #1 cause of accidental deaths. And that, to me, is crazy, because if you think about it, basically these people are killing themselves. But they need a little bit of help. And that's why I was like, we just need to talk about this, right? We need to talk about becoming aware of what is actually happening for you. And again, it can be very subtle. You can be like, oh, I'm not really addicted at all. Meanwhile, if I don't get that spin class in, I'm going to kill somebody. That's not so great, right? We need to be a little bit more pliable. So become aware. Once you become aware of the behavior, then you tap into that power, right? Whatever that power is for you, tap into it. Get on your knees and ask for help, ask for forgiveness, or ask for a little bit of trust and faith, and start to build your faith in this power, whatever it is. Again, if you're religious, you already know what it is that you're praying to, but just as a generalization, God with a lowercase g. Find something for you that you feel is going to help lift you a little bit. And then start to look at your behavior and say, well, yeah, if I'm drinking on a regular basis, or my mind is leading me to the next time I'm going to drink, then maybe that's not the right motivation. Maybe you can shift that and say, okay, instead of going to the next drink or the next cigarette or the next cup of coffee or the next ice cream or the next sugar, whatever it is, maybe you can start to change it into a healthy way. Hey, you know what? Instead of, for me, when I quit smoking, I started making sure I had water with us when I started drinking water on a more regular basis. I was like, I'm just going to, every time I want a cigarette, I'm going to make sure I take a few big gulps of water. And that worked for me. So maybe that's something that you can do. There's a lot of different tools, but it's a moment-to-moment practice, actually, that happens here. And then, you know, in the 12 steps, there's the final 3 steps, which is basically you make amends on a regular basis. So once you've sort of conquered the addiction, then you basically live the principles, and you make amends on a regular basis if you do something wrong. You pray and meditate, and you carry the message of being clean and sober, right? Like, that's the 12 steps, the last 3. But before you get there, you have to go through the inventory, and you have to make amends, and you have to do all these things. And the main idea that I just want to get across is first to become aware. Once you become aware of what's going on, then after the awareness, then you start to build that layer of faith inside and trust that you can change in a way. And this is like motivational stuff and self-empowerment stuff too. It doesn't necessarily, it all will easily plug and play to that. It doesn't necessarily need to only be for addictions, but addictions can be subtle. So make sure that if you have something in your life that you want to change, you can use these principles as well. And like if it's a spending habit or something, you're like, well, it's not really an addiction, but maybe it is, because maybe you're self-sabotaging on a regular basis. Anyway, build the faith, then look at those details, right? Look at those details. What is it that you're going toward that's negative for you? And see if you can pause. See if you can take the time and pause and ask yourself why it is that you're going for the fix. Is it because you feel incomplete? And if it's because you feel incomplete, then you have to tell yourself that you are complete. Right? And I'm not saying, oh yeah, go look in the mirror and say, I am complete. I mean, maybe that is what you have to do. But you have to really feel it from within. Just like they say in the Bible, right? It's like the kingdom of heaven is within. Happiness comes from the inside. It's an inside job. All these little cliches that you hear are true. So you have to begin, that's why meditation is so important. You really have to begin to understand yourself and the inner workings of your brain and the inner workings of your behavior, because that's what's actually going to help you. So that is my talk for the day, you guys. I really hope that you can take some time and do this for yourself and share it with others. And of course, subscribe either to the Facebook or Instagram. And that's it, you guys. I really appreciate you watching. And if you have any questions, for sure, post them down below. I'll be writing a blog post about this, so I'll post it tomorrow. And may everyone be well. Thanks, you guys. See you next time. Hey guys, thanks so much for watching the video. I really appreciate it. I'd also appreciate it if you share it with your friends, but subscribe so you get regular updates when I'm posting new content. So click that button over here, or maybe it's up under here, or maybe it's down below. It's got to be somewhere around here, I think. So it's the universal energy ball of subscription. So click that button. Thanks so much, and I'll see you soon.